When your boss says you can never do this straightforward and very easy thing, sometimes you have to maliciously comply. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, you can find a better place to stay. By all means, go ahead. So we're getting a couple of storms and it's been heavy rain and wind for the past week. It's bad enough that certain areas are evacuated. I live in a pretty good house that can stand that level of wind and rain. Where it's located, flooding is not a concern. So relatives, friends, and neighbors are welcome if they need a place to stay. In comes Aunt Kay, 60s, my mom's sister and her 3 children, female 32, male 28, and female 20, with their children. Aunt Kay is a hassle and I'd honestly rather not deal with her, but her place isn't in a good spot. So I let them stay at my place until the storm blows over. Aunt Kay has been nagging and complaining non-stop. All she does is lays around on her phone, complaining about everything she can think of. Her kids have told her to stop, which turns into her becoming a raging, screaming witch. So one day, while we're in the living room, Aunt Kay comes in and was talking to another aunt, Emma. Aunt Kay was complaining about my place, and Aunt Emma was trying to tell her off, but ain't no stopping that word-vomiting hag. Aunt Kay then says that she can find a better place. Mind you, it's been raining all day and the winds have gotten stronger. You go outside and you'll be pelted and maybe fly off if you aren't careful. As her oldest is telling her to stop, Aunt Kay just keeps going on and tells me my house sucks and whoever built it had crap for brains. This set me off, as the house was designed by my parents and they put their heart and soul into it. So I told her to leave and find a better place then if she doesn't like my place. Aunt Kay looked offended and started telling Aunt Emma what I had just said. Aunt Emma told her off and then hung up. Aunt Kay looked at me and just tried to go back to her bed, but I told her she had to leave and find another place. She didn't want to apologize and told me I was being sensitive and needed to respect my elders. I told her she didn't respect me, and since she could find a better place, she ought to leave. I wasn't backing down, so she went and got her stuff, and when she saw her kids and grandkids weren't going with her, she was not happy. I gave her an umbrella and some cash. This happened at around 9 a.m. She came back at around 2 p.m., drenched and defeated. She gave me a quiet apology and begged to be let in. Turns out she went around to some of her friends' places and even her boyfriends, but they were either gone or telling her off for freaking around in the storm. She now just lazes and keeps quiet. I don't care if she still complains, but at least I don't have to hear it. Edit, this happened in the Philippines. She did return the umbrella but not the cash. It was $5, 250 pesos for fare. This is nothing new from her. She'll try to push boundaries to get her way, but if I'm near, I call her out on it. She's a big believer in respecting your elders, but what she did is seen as a massive freak you. You don't insult hospitality. She's been getting verbal smackdowns from other relatives for what she did. I mean, in a stressful situation like this, you just gotta be glad that Aunt Kay went on her Aunt Way. Upset Pachyderm commented, "Not sure this is quite malicious compliance, but whatever it is, it's great. Hope your weather abates, and with it, Aunt Kay." Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy awesome stories of malicious compliance, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our next story is, time to find a new job and accept any offer? Don't mind if I do. My former boss didn't realize that to actually make money, he had to show up for work. Instead, he came and went as he pleased and expected me to pick up the slack and essentially try to play the role of receptionist, paralegal, office manager, and attorney. I never gave legal advice, he just expected me to, and so did his clients. His friend was my divorce attorney and worked in the same building, so he'd pop in just to chat, see how things were going, etc. But he started noticing my boss was absent more than not and questioned how things were going. I started confiding in him that I was really concerned because I could see former boss shelling out more than he was making, and his clients were less than pleased at never being able to speak with their attorney. Then former boss started doing some unethical and shady things to move cases along, and I started getting really nervous about what would happen if former boss got caught and what it meant for me. I told my attorney / former boss's friend all of this, and he said that his own firm needed extra support staff, but he didn't want it to appear like he was poaching me from his friend on purpose, and that I had to talk with former boss about the state of the office and see if there was a way to salvage things. I never really got that chance though, because later that day, former boss stormed into the office and told me I needed to start looking for a new job and to just take the first offer I get because he was probably going to have to shut his doors down in the next 90 days and he couldn't guarantee me a paycheck. I spoke with my attorney the next day about it and he shrugged and said for me to just give my 2 weeks notice and call it a day. Later that same day, former boss came into the office and told me to hold off on finding a new job and to give him a month to turn things around. Sorry, but I've got bills to pay, so I'm not going to sit idly and wonder if I'm going to see a next paycheck or not. I drafted my 2 weeks notice, only because my attorney asked it of me as a professional courtesy to his friend, and gave it to my former boss at the end of the pay period. Cue surprised Pikachu.jpg look from former boss. You're leaving? But why? Per our conversation on that date, you advised me to find other employment, so I did. They reply, where? Friend's law firm. They said, seriously? When I make this business work, I'm going to want you back. Is that going to be a problem? I reply, good luck. They say, what's he paying? I said, less than you and half the hours, but at least I know his checks won't bounce. I heard from my replacement on his first solo day, I trained him during my last week, that my former boss regretted telling me on a whim to leave because I was the only one who knew anything about his cases. Sucks to suck. He shouldn't have left me to run his firm without help, knowing I'm not an attorney or licensed paralegal, while he went on lavish vacations and ignored all his clients. Even if former boss wanted to try to get me to come back, I've already been bumped to full-time hours and gotten a raise in less than a month, and there's promise of a second raise very soon to put me at what I was making at former bosses. But here, I get paid holidays, PTO, and sick leave. No way on God's green earth would I go back to former boss. You can definitely tell OP's one of the good ones, one of those magic workers you want to keep around. And here's the thing, even if their experience with the former boss was so negative, that's exactly the kind of thing that you look at and you still kind of appreciate in a way if you're OP, because it surely made OP so much stronger working in that field and being capable of so much more than they probably ever would be able to do if they didn't have kind of been thrown into the fire. Mr. Aloysius Mithrax commented, I bet the only reason your new boss didn't match your hours and pay at first was because you were left on your own so much he wasn't sure how much you knew about the job. Guess it didn't take long to prove yourself and vindicate his instinct you might be a good hire. OP responded saying, that was part of the reason, yes. My former boss also worked mainly with probate and county courts on administration and guardianship cases, whereas my new boss only does family law cases in district courts. There was a bit of a learning curve, but he was impressed at how quickly I can catch on and remember these different policies and procedures. Initially, my role was mainly clerical, but now I'm absorbing a few basic responsibilities of his paralegal, though only what I'm qualified to do, contacting courts and requesting copies of documents or initial drafts of basic documents. In my new boss's words, I'm not yet fully accountable for all of my work since he or his paralegal review every document I'm assigned, but once I lose my training wheels, that's when I get bumped up to my former salary. All's well that ends well. Our next story is guy who flips out over his internet speed gets less. So a little backstory, I work for an internet provider company as a lead in the internet repair department. This means that I get calls from agents who work there that either need help with a situation because they're stuck and don't know what to do, or when a customer escalates the call asking for a supervisor, manager, or someone above them. My department mainly handles internet issues like being offline, outages, replacing equipment, etc. So the other day was like any other. I'm getting calls from agents needing equipment transferred from one account to another, scheduling a technician for customers who refuse to do any troubleshooting. The list goes on and on. One of my main calls is an agent asking for me to run a special tool that corrects the speed being sent to a customer. This usually happens when a customer upgrades or downgrades their internet speed and it doesn't take right away, and this only takes a couple minutes. This comes in later. On this particular day, I get a call from an agent that says her customer wants to speak to a supervisor because he's not getting the speeds he pays for. This happens quite a lot, usually because most people don't understand how the internet works and all the factors that come into the result of a speed test. This can include a lot of things like how far away you are from your router, if you're testing on Wi-Fi or directly connected, how many devices you're currently using, and even things like how your residence is built, because stone and concrete do not allow Wi-Fi signals to travel through. When I looked at the customer's account, I see that he's currently subscribed to 100 megabits per second. Our normal plans are 300, 500, and a gig, which is 1,000. I asked the agent what results he was getting, and she told me it was 437 megabits per second, which is way over what he's paying for. I told the agent to go ahead and transfer him to me, and I'll continue the discussion. Once the customer gets to me, we'll call him Darren. I introduce myself and ask how I can help. Darren immediately begins yelling and cursing at me about how he's not getting what he pays for and is extremely upset, and even demanding credit to his account because of this. I begin to try and apologize to Darren and explain that speed test results can vary based on certain conditions. He cuts me off and states that he's recording the call and will be posting everything I say on social media. I tell him that's fine, as all of our calls are recorded for quality assurance purposes as well, and everything will be documented. Darren then proceeds to continue cursing, stating that this is unacceptable, and I should be ashamed of myself for working for a company that does not provide the product people are paying for. While he rants on and on, I noticed that he had recently changed his internet plan from 500 megabits per second to 100 megabits per second 2 days ago. Now, as I mentioned before, sometimes the internet changes don't happen right away, and we have to run a specific tool to fix it. This can happen when the modem has not been reset to reflect these changes. I try to tell Darren that he's receiving more than what he's paying for, and again, he cuts me off, stating that he'll be reporting us to the FCC, Better Business Bureau, and filing a lawsuit about this, all while recording our conversation. Now, normally I wouldn't care, and I'd allow the speed to continue going through until the system automatically fixes it, but his attitude and rude demeanor made me feel otherwise. Cue the malicious compliance. I respond to Darren saying, "Sir, you are absolutely right, and I am so sorry that you are not receiving the speeds you're paying for. I will get this fixed right away." Now, this plan that Darren was on, the 100 speed, is a plan that only certain customers can get if they're financially unable to make normal payments. Meaning he had to apply for this program and be approved based on his low income, so I run the fix tool on his internet and reduce the speed down to 100 as he requested. I then ask him how his speed results are now. Darren then responds, "It's even worse than it was before. What kind of trick are you trying to pull on me?" I responded, "Sir, you told me you were not getting the speeds you were paying for, and you were right. You recently applied for financial assistance to be downgraded to 100, and I fixed that for you. It was absolutely wrong of us to be sending you 500 when you were only paying for 100. I apologize for the inconvenience." After a few minutes of silence, Darren then muffled to himself, "This is ridiculous," and proceeded to disconnect the call. I left notes on his account so any future agent would know what had happened that day, and that he was not entitled to any credit on his bill. All I can say is, be careful what you complain about. I'm honestly trying to figure out what he was hoping to achieve here. Was he hoping they would go, "Oh, we made some grave mistake and yeah, we'll, give you 500 megabits for free as a gesture of goodwill. Please don't sue us, Darren." Starfury42 commented, "I worked for lawyers and had one call in because he couldn't get on Wi-Fi. They were all password protected. I asked him which was his and if he knew the password. He told me he didn't pay for internet, he used the open ones. I got to tell him he had to get his own internet and I could not help him further. Guy bills $500 an hour and can't afford internet." Mr. Dumb as Can Be commented, "I wouldn't trust this guy to do any lawyering for me if he always uses open Wi-Fi connections. Data breach waiting to happen." Our next story is, "Never call you again?" Okay, done. About a dozen years ago, I was working in a banking call center. The company was informed of some governmental change that required us to have a tax ID number for everyone with our business credit card account, and we had some ridiculously short time frame to be in compliance. There were tens of thousands of accounts with this ID missing. It hadn't been previously required. A big group of us were given lists of customers and told to call them and ask for the tax ID number. If they had it, we added it to the account and all was well. If they didn't have it, we were to switch them to a consumer, non-business card. If they didn't want that, we'd cancel on the spot. Due to the short time frame for compliance, the customer had to tell us on the call which they preferred. Another nifty caveat was that we were only making 2 calls and were not leaving messages. We couldn't drag this out waiting for people to eventually call us back. If we got the person on the first call, we were done. If we still didn't get them on the second call either, the account was auto-canceled. This sounds like a horrible job to do, but it was actually going really well. 99% of the people I called were happy to comply or switch accounts. Then I called Karen. The phone rang, and as I was about to hang up, when I heard that pause and double ring that tells you the call was forwarded, so I waited, Karen replies, "What?" I could hear background noise like she was out in public. I said, "Hi, this is Jane Doe with XXX Bank," and the Karen jumps in, "Why the freak are you calling my cell phone? Are you freaking stupid? I've told you people to never call this number." I reply, "I didn't. The call was..." Karen jumps in again, "Oh my god, now you're going to lie to me? Pay attention. Never call me again. I use your credit card for everything and pay it, so you have no reason to call me. Got it?" I reply, "Yes, but..." Phone disconnects. Malicious compliance kicks off. "Okay, so I spoke to you, maybe a dozen words. You didn't provide your tax ID, and I can't call you back because you said to never do that. Next button? Cancel. Notes? Customer did not provide the tax ID and demanded we never call her again." I really hope she was out shopping and had fun when her card was declined at the next store. Now, to be fair, I understand why they had to limit it and restrict it to 2 calls like they did, but that kind of does really suck for your customers. I mean, especially nowadays, if you get a call and it's not even a number you recognize, how many people are actually even going to pick up? Let alone somebody like this who has a completely separate number that doesn't want people like that calling there. Pancake Nom commented, "I don't know. If I got a completely unexpected call saying, 'Hi, I work for your bank and need your tax ID number right now or else I'll cancel your account,' without any prior written notice or correspondence, that would seem incredibly fishy to me." Government regulations change slowly and generally have plenty of time for affected companies to transition to compliance with the new regulations. So unless your company ignored a change in requirements until the very last minute, there should have been adequate time to send out written notifications to customers. So an unexpected call, asking for sensitive information and making the request seem urgent and needing a response right that second are all major red flags for phishing. Eldritch Drake commented, "As someone who works in a legitimate call center who has to do similar things, I advise the consumer if they feel uncomfortable to please call our corporate phone line. They end up transferred back to me after some time and tend to go, 'Oh, you were for real.' I advise this to anyone who gets cold called, a good security measure." Our next story is, "I'm not allowed to go outside of our travel agency to save money, so I didn't." I have quite a flair for finding cheap travel and accommodation. My travels on a strict budget have taken me to 3 continents so far, so I'd say I've picked up a few tricks. Nowadays, I get the pleasure of doing short trips with my work when attending conferences and seminars. As I prefer not to waste money, I've arranged the trips privately and then requested it paid back afterwards. It worked out well for all of us budget-wise. Then we got new directions for handling travel costs. We all had to go through a new travel agency whenever booking, well, anything. The top brass held a talk about it and everything. We were warned that onwards, any application for money back after a trip booked privately may be outright denied. I had tried to use the travel agency before, but found that it only allowed a few overpriced airlines and hotels, and it wouldn't let you book anything outside of their approved connections. Cue malicious compliance. Where I previously combined train and bus tickets to reduce cost, I now just selected the top option. Oh, 5 times more expensive? Too bad. A nice low-range hotel that covered my needs? No longer available. Choose suggested option. I guess I will stay at the Hilton then. I just got back from a trip that cost 5 times what I could have paid if I'd been able to do my thing. No flights were available the day I could have left, so I went a day earlier. No afternoon flight was available after my meeting, so I stayed an extra night. I was basically off work half a week extra because of that travel agency, and the trip ended up costing more than my monthly paycheck. Oh, and the travel agency? They were apparently the lowest bidder on the contract, claiming they would supply the cheapest travel options. I enjoyed the complimentary champagne. Unless you really like this company or know somebody that's in a place of management or ownership, if they're gonna give you this runaround and say you have to use the service, you might as well just take those nice options, right? Until they tell you you can't, why not? Sailboat Fool commented, "Happened to me also. Found out the managers and executives were taking expensive vacations on points we earned. Stopped when no one would travel because it became common knowledge." OSR0 commented, "One time I had a guy try to justify that to me. The company loses out on a lot of points when the employees book these trips, and now they can keep them." To which I replied, "Those sad points are the compensation you receive for being away from your home, family, and friends. Now your company isn't even giving you that." He got really quiet and said, "I hadn't thought about it like that." Our next story is, we're not allowed to ship product using anything other than a certain company? Okay, sure. I work in the apparel industry, and one of our customers is a company who frequently finds itself on lists of top 10 in the Americas. From our location, one of their gigantic distribution centers are only about 90 minutes away. Once, when we did a very small order for them, result only about 10% of our MOQ, we thought instead of shipping it through an Express X, why not just drop it off at their DC? Since the shipping address was to their DC, it would get there faster than by Express X and cheaper too. When our driver went there, the DC refused to take delivery. No problem, we called the person in charge on their side with our company, and we laid out the problem. Well, the person was extremely rude and simply said, "We do not intend to accept any deliveries made other than the contractual method of using Express X," and shot off multiple emails to our VP, president, and our holding company's CEO about not following contractually required methods. So our driver comes back, we ship the product using Express X. 3 weeks ago, a frantic call and a decently large order, but extremely urgent order. Okay, we have our time estimates to complete the work and the shipping date we would be able to manage, agreed upon in email. We shipped it through Express X, even though it was said to use any means necessary to try to get it to them by the shipping date. In raging phone calls and screaming duels, our holding company CEO went over the vendor manager's head into their purchasing and inventory VP, complained about the manager's behavior in their previous email about only using Express X as contractually stated, and our adherence to the shipping date as we packed the trailer and locked it with a seal and date on it. The Express X semi came at 1 a.m. to pick up the trailer. Not our fault, we followed the contractually stated rules. Guess who just lost 9 major universities in college football from their vendor management portfolio? Now, to play devil's advocate, I kind of see fault on both sides here. I mean, when you're filling an order like this and it's big and it is contractually obligated, you probably shouldn't go around changing methods up, just assuming that they'll be okay with it. At the same time, the other company shouldn't have given them such a runaround about following the contract and recognized that was a cost-effective change. Just, hey, can we communicate about this next time? Honestly, I bet the person who had to complain about the contract obligations didn't really have enough time to really get a full appreciation of what is even going on. Just stick to the contract, please. I've got other stuff to worry about. HMS Slarty Bartfast commented, "I'm hoping this is followed up with, we have a new point of contact with our client. They are much more reasonable than the previous one." Our next story is, well, that's the seasoning you asked for. This story isn't quite as malicious as certain other submissions, but it shows what a pedantic, easily annoyed little crap I could be as a kid, so I thought it might fit. My dad and I love to cook, so we tend to have a good variety of ingredients, especially herbs and spices. When I was in, I want to say middle school, we discovered garlic powder, and we used it on almost everything that it could possibly taste good on. To my annoyance, my mom insisted on calling it garlic salt, even after I explained several times that that's a different seasoning. Finally, I had my dad pick up a shaker of actual garlic salt and waited. Eventually, my mom asked me to bring her the salt, pepper, and garlic salt for whatever she was eating, so I did just that. When she inevitably asked why her food was so salty, I explained to her that I brought her exactly what she asked for: salt, pepper, and garlic salt. She never called it garlic salt again, and I felt so satisfied with my smart buttery. I can't blame OP for getting upset here. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to teach my mom that it's called Chipotle. Every time you get that breakthrough and they finally understand, oh yeah, Chipotle, it goes a while, you talk to her, it comes up again. Chipotle. Magic592 commented, I was a 16-year-old newly promoted prep chef. Previous prep chef quit with no notice, given no real training, so recipe calls for 2 cups granulated garlic and went to the storeroom and there was garlic salt and garlic powder. So looking at them, the salt looked granulated. Well, there went 10 pounds of butter, 3 pounds of shallots, half a case of tomatoes right to the trash can. Oops. Our next story is, was told I should go elsewhere, so I did. About a year ago, I was working for a manufacturing company that had mismanaged itself into a zero operating cash scenario long before I got hired on. After all the managers who had hired me in got fired with no notice, I got nervous and started looking around for other employment. At one point, I was trying to update a customer with status regarding some in-process issue that landed squarely in the newly appointed, but formally as well, engineering manager's responsibility. And he told me I should never have brought it up and that I should just keep my mouth shut. I told him it was too late for that and that they wanted an update. But he was too busy watching TV on his iPad, which as far as I can tell is all he ever really did, so I told him that I would just reach out to his contacts for the update myself. He said, yeah, do that, and if you don't like how long it takes me to respond to the customer, you should just go somewhere else. Little did he know I had an interview the next day. I have never quit a job with no notice in my life until that day. Get freaked, Timmy. I mean, it goes without saying, that is clear-cut a job you walk out on and never look back. You want to talk about willingly choosing to stay on a sinking ship? TVLL commented, this is where, when you write your resignation letter, you throw the manager under the bus. Engineering manager said I should just go somewhere else. I am taking his direction to do so and am resigning, effective immediately. Best regards, OP. OP responded saying, I sent my auto reply to contact the CFO, who was acting as CEO after orchestrating the firing of that guy, for questions or updates that would have come from me, and sent a very short letter to the CFO/CEO explaining that I would not be returning to work on Monday with no explanation. So technically not no notice, but it's not like the CEO, ops manager, quality/engineering manager, or any of the other employees he fired got a notice or a pip. Freak 'em. I didn't even really like any of those folks who got fired, but once I saw how crap went down, I knew there was no point in trying to take the high road. Never got a reply to my email, never got a phone call, no questions asked. I think it was planned that I would be fired, and that sociopath got his feelings hurt when he didn't get to do it, so he had a meeting to trash talk me and get some kind of satisfaction. Our next story is, manager doesn't allow skin color descriptions. Not very satisfying, but malicious compliance nonetheless. Years ago, I was working at a corporate chain sports bar. One of the managers famously had short man syndrome, where he had to be right at all times and didn't allow anyone to deviate from his edicts. One day, a server was asking him to go talk to a customer due to our mistake. When asked which person to speak to, the server replied, Table 300, the black guy wearing, as she was cut short by the manager yelling at her, we do not see race, we do not see color, they are all customers at this company. Do you understand me? Manager was sure to nitpick absolutely everything and micromanage her for the rest of the night. Fast forward a few weeks, same issue with the same server. Remembering his previous screaming fit, she told him to talk to the guy wearing orange at table 250. It was football season. Virtually everyone in the building was wearing the home team's orange. Manager had to awkwardly ask the customer who had an issue, deeply embarrassing him. Once he was back in the kitchen, he really laid into the server for embarrassing him before firing her on the spot. The next day, we all verified his previous instructions and her malicious but correct compliance, so the general manager was forced to call her up and offer her job back. Manager was not disciplined in any way, but that's restaurant life. Is there a word for something when somebody clearly has like some kind of good intention, but what they say or do with those good intentions ends up actually being way worse than if they just ignored it to begin with? I mean, there was absolutely nothing wrong with what OP said. They were so worried about being racist that they accidentally overcorrected and became racist again, just in the opposite direction where you can't even acknowledge a person. Also, Pancake Nom commented making a really good point. Manager had to awkwardly ask the customers who had an issue, deeply embarrassing him. What is embarrassing about, "Hello, I'm the manager on duty. I was told someone here has a concern. How can I be of assistance?" Clearly, the manager's critical thinking skills need a little bit more refining. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another awesome malicious compliance story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.